Aaron, defender of the galaxy. Pew, pew, pew. Captain,
That's it. Yeah?
the aliens will be here and too late. Aaron has dispatched them already. Hey, welcome to Frame Rate. Show where we rate frames. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That's what you're listening to.
That's my pal, Abe Epperson.
And that's my pal, Michael Swain.
And we mentioned a third person, not a very special guest, but a very special being. Aaron, Defender of the Galaxy, who brings you this episode of Frame Rate by subscribing to the Patreon at the Pick the Flick tier. So thank you, Aaron, very much for bringing this into our lives. And you offered that we could watch either The Happy Poet or a Mel Gibson movie. So we chose The Happy Poet.
Hey. Look, thanks. Thank you for your support.
Yes, thank you for your support. And in Aaron's defense, it was one of the two acceptable Mel Gibson movies to still like, one of which is Chicken Run, which Aaron picked, and one of which is, of course, Maverick. You can still like Maverick. I'll allow that. It's just
only
so good.
for William Goldman.
For the Goldman effect, that's right. But so we didn't get a guest this week. And I think I'm glad, Abe. I think I'm glad. We'll let Aaron tell us if it annoys them. But I think this is a movie that's really, really small and intimate and a special little treat just for me and you specifically. And most of the stuff I got out of it is about you and I and our artistic partnership. So I don't know.
Making an independent film. So just if people probably haven't seen it, because this is a film that was... It went to the Venice Film Festival, was seen by very few people. We're talking box office, like $3,000. You can tell it was like filmed with like available light, and it would be what I would call like a mumblecore movie.
Written, directed by, and starring Paul Gordon.
Yeah, so it's like this very small, humble film, and that's a hard thing to do. And I, as well, when I was watching it, couldn't help but reflect on the fact that this came out in 2010, and in 2010, you and I were making a movie
That's right.
that was made for like $90,000 with a lot more bells and whistles.
Yeah, Kill Me Now. You can check out the movie we were making right around the same time as The Happy Poet in its entirety on YouTube, so please do that. But I think you're going to get a lot of reminiscing because, the exact same thing, of course, struck me, especially because in a nutshell, this movie's deliciously easy to nutshell. Our hero, Bill, is a poet, but not a professional poet, just someone who has written poetry and starts a healthy food stand and with his like weird two friends in quotes, but just
people
other
he meets while
people who are in his life.
His first two customers, basically.
Essentially.
One of them is a friend.
One of them's a friend because they're at a party at night hanging out, and he goes, "Hey, I'll join your business." And he goes, "Cool." And the other guy is just this guy he met at the park who came by the stand. And together they form an unlikely trio, expand the business, suffer setbacks, and then ultimately the business becomes big and becomes like quote unquote a real restaurant, and that's it. That's the story. But it's quite obviously speaking to any sort of artistic endeavor, right? And really any endeavor at all, what it is to strive, which is sort of putting grandiose terms around this simple, a very humble mumblecore movie that reminded me more than anything of, which makes sense because it's out of Texas, but like Mike Judge, like really unassuming. Abe nailed it. Mumblecore is the word. But...
Yeah, and for people who don't know what mumblecore is, real quick, like it's just there was a little film movement that occurred that like early work by the Duplass brothers, Noah Baumbach, I would say, is probably in this category. And what it is it's films that are usually younger people. And they don't have a lot of blocking or action. It's almost all dialogue with scenes, people sitting in rooms, often made for very little. And a lot of the time they say cryptic things, or the dialogue is stilted in a way that is noticeable. Some people might call it twee or whatever, but yeah, that's the. And
I think
it started
it's interesting
in like 2000.
In that I associate with mumblecore stuff being stilted in a way that actually makes it seem more authentic and organic, which is funny because the word stilted we usually use to mean not realistic, right? But traditionally, the great gift of storytelling, and especially film, a medium like film that's really so short, right? Even 4 hours is not that much of your life. It cuts out bullshit that in real life would be pointless and boring to say, but actually gets said. Like, what? I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. No, he went down the street. He'll be back at some point. I didn't ask. $4. Shit like that, right? We cut that shit out. Yeah. Mumblecore keeps that shit in. It's like, what if a movie was that realistic? Mm-hmm. And it didn't shy away from being quote unquote boring at times. So that's this kind of thing. And I forgot to say, because it's almost so nonchalantly thrown in there, he falls in love and gets married and impregnates a beautiful woman also. But like, if you follow me, he makes a food cart, he starts from nothing, he ends up happily ever after. And for being so traditional, like that's almost a fairy tale structure, it combines that with a very non-traditional execution, other than the people Abe mentions. Like, yes, other people have done this. Tim Heidecker's The Comedy came to mind for me, but it does make it feel. Well, let's dig into it. Abe, what'd you think of The Happy Poet? How did it make you feel?
You know me, Michael, and you know my tastes. This is not typically my bag of veggies here. It's like I don't know. I don't know if you know what, I'll just fucking dive in. Like, I didn't want to really start with this, but I guess let's just have it out. Like, the final shot, which is him saying, "I don't think I've ever been this happy before." And he has this dead
so hard.
I didn't laugh. I don't know how to describe it. And you know what? Film's main thing is to make someone feel something. So there we go. But he's got this deadpan look on his face, and I understand that it's a joke. It registers as irony. But I just don't know what it's for, though. Like, what's the point? Why is he unhappy and happy at the same time? What does it say? I know this makes me either dumb.
Why is the happy poet and hedonic? Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Well, it is anti-comedy in a way, for sure.
It's anti-comedy, and I understand, and I do like some anti-comedy. There's some very great non sequiturs and stuff like that. Like you mentioned Tim and Eric, there's a lot of funny stuff there. Tim Robinson, etc. I want to get it, but I feel like I'm dumb or excluded from the joke, and I'm a Neanderthal, so that kind of makes me angry.
That kind of make me mad.
It kind of make me mad. I'm like, why is it that I don't get this? I feel like I should be getting this because it feels like the most softball joke in the world, but he ends his movie on it with such a punctuation, and I only elevate this moment because it's like a nutshell for me for this movie, is that, like, why, if it's a movie about passion, is he so passionless?
Well, and of course, this has been done straight, so to speak, in the movie Chef, right? Chef is literally the same story using the same metaphor, a food truck as a metaphor for artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
And but it's much more of a 4-quadrant happy, like, family comedy, and he falls in love and gets married in that movie.
It's great. That's great.
Yeah, and it's good. It's really good.
Chef is really good. I like that one because you feel Jon Favreau's passion for food. He wants to make
and you're
the best
saying
food.
Why
and
do we care about Napoleon Dynamite having
son.
Right.
He loves his son, wants him to engage in the world around him and be a part of his life now. That's way different than this guy, right?
Well, you're saying, okay, yes, but a few things. One, I did write, okay, so that joke did make me laugh really hard, but I also, in the same breath, immediately wrote in my notes, it kind of sucks that the last moment of this film is the first moment that I fully understood the extent to which he's in on the joke, and that he really did mean it to be funny.
Yeah.
And I wish that he had some broader jokes throughout, to clue me in that I was supposed to be watching it through that lens, because I really thought he was anhedonic and I think it's both. I think it is a statement on anhedonia and depression, chronic depression, and a statement, and it's used for comedic effect. But I do think it's a kind of a weakness that it took me till the end to go, okay, it was a joke sometimes. Sometimes those were jokes. Okay.
Right.
And I thought it was really funny in retrospect, but I agree that you could call that a flaw, right? Or you could call that, well, that's weird. You kind of traditionally want to know that there are jokes or it wasn't funny, right? By definition.
Yeah.
Because I will say that, but I'll also say that it's mumblecore itself is almost a living embodiment of, okay, so you before we started taping, you asked me how I'm doing, and I said I'd say on the pod because it's pertinent.
Right.
This is the most closely you've ever caught me in the midst of a full-on depressive, like, panic episode right before a pod.
I assumed. Yeah.
Oh, you could tell. Okay. Or you mean because when I say I'll save it for the pod, it's usually that.
Well, you didn't play video games with me last night, and then this morning I saw your Twitter when I woke up, and I was like, the things I know, my friend. But hey, man.
But it was like,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. But I bring it up because I do think it's highly relevant. So I've been depressed for about a day and a half, and I have been acting like Bill. And watching the movie, I was like, I'm so great. This is good to say. Nowadays, I'm rarely this depressed. It's because I'm fucking with my medication right now. Like, there's a known reason. Okay. But so don't worry too much out there in radio land. But the point is, I actually got to watch this movie when I was like a sad sack anhedonic puddle on the couch, which I think, and thinking thoughts like, patronage is down. That means we're not funny. This movie's not gonna go. If you listen to our other podcasts about Papa Bear, like, it's all gonna fall apart. Why? Because we're bad and we're not talented. And like, and at the same time having thoughts like, why? But I have Abe in my life. Why can't I just be happy for the good things I have? Like, we get to work and write together. Yeah, you can't be happy about those things because you're a self-centered piece of shit who'll only be happy when you get the impossible. Like, you can always make it worse. Like, if you're smart, you can recriminate yourself deeper and deeper and deeper in this hole. And then I watched this movie about a guy who I think is supposed to embody, and a genre that embodies, people who straight up do not have anything obvious going for them. And there are a lot of people like that with that lot in life in the world. Like, there's a monologue early in the movie where he says, the reason I think people want to find a partner is so that they have someone they like who's around, so that their job that sucks seems a little more bearable, because most people's jobs suck. And it's easy to forget how lucky we are, even though we're not, you know what I mean? Like, I know you're working on edits that you would rather work on different, more fun edits, but we get to do the thing a little bit sometimes and basically not work at a factory punching holes in sheets of metal, right? And I do think that it's important to have stories for people with sort of that lot in life, and it's not about he's the special boy because he has a special vision, or he's especially handsome or charming. No, he's none of those things. He just showed up and he has value just because he's a human being alive. Like, can't he get a story just because? No reason. I actually think there is something endearing about that. Yeah.
No, that there's charm in that in itself. Like, what's interesting is you mentioned that, and the movie I watched after this was Tender Bar. Have you seen that?
No, not yet.
And that's also about that. It's about a young kid dealing with trauma, but like ultimately, like, of his father, but like ultimately he doesn't know what he wants until like he needs a narrative out of his life, and he's not getting it. And we put ourselves under this microscope so often and compare our dailies to others' highlight reel. so often that it's like sometimes just existing is enough. You can change someone's life, and this movie definitely has that. There's a character who's like, when he eats the first customer, essentially, because the first day he goes out and tries to sell it,
gets zero customers till the end of the day.
Everyone throws it away, or they hate it or whatever because it's it's veganism or whatnot, and so jokes. But one guy who's just like, oh, you gonna throw all this stuff away? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna throw this away so you can like have this. And he like eats it and he goes, man, this is great. And it's like such a typical beat. Like it's almost to the point that I was like assured that when I was watching a movie that would happen, like as soon as I saw him drive up on his bicycle, I was like, I bet he's gonna like the food. But that kind of criticism or that kind of expectation sometimes gets us away from the point of, all this movie is trying to do is simply say a very structureless thing. And even though I can be critical about that structurelessness, it does have a compelling argument just for also, like, for example, the tagline to this movie is "Make a Stand," right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is
and
cute.
His stand is very, very minor, which is he doesn't want to sell hot dogs, he wants to sell health food. That's all. Although it is hilarious to me that the movie treats it like, and with like a weirdo idea like that, how is he ever going to make it? Everyone in town is like, what? You don't have hot dogs? And I'm like, dude, this dude would be a millionaire today. Food trucks are fucking everything. That is life now.
And I mean, it was made in 2010. That was less true, but still not untrue.
There were already food trucks
in
and shit.
Texas or wherever this was made.
Right.
Like if this was made in 2000, I would call it downright prescient. But like, it's not a crazy new idea.
It's funny that they treat his idea like it's a weird idea, but whatever. I also, I will say the weakest part of the movie to me actually is when it embraces traditional structure. So I don't like, actually, I mean, what I wrote is, and this is what sucks about being human, children listening to this, is that it ends with him meeting a rich guy by chance. And then all his dreams come true. And if you translate that to trying to make it in Hollywood, as Abe and I are trying to do, that is how capricious and frustrating it is. And I actually thought one of the highlights of the movie was the moment where he goes back to the guy who gave him the bank loan and he says, let's be honest, the bank loan you gave me was like an insult. No one could run a business on that little amount of money. You did it as a joke, but it worked out for me and I'm going to live happily ever after. But I need you to know, I just got lucky. That's all that happened. I just got lucky. That business should not have succeeded. And that is, I think, actually a pretty healthy dose of like self-awareness from Paul Gordon. And in the sense that as someone with a dog in this fight, it made me very sad and angry. I was almost jealous of Bill. Like he was a real person. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, of course he blows up because he meets some rich angel investor financier. What? That shit will never happen in real life. And then I wrote in my notes like, either someday after great struggle that will happen to me in some form,
or it won't.
And I will, or it won't. And what's funny and ironic about being a human animal is if it does happen to me, I'll tweet shit like, never give up because your dreams do eventually come true. Stories are real. Like, we enshrine that story because it's true. You work hard and you get it. Or if I don't get it, I'll tweet, the greatest lie in fiction is that there's fairness or a just reward at the end. You know what I mean? Like everyone just thinks whatever happens to them is validating of whatever reality is. When it's so far from the truth.
In this story, the mantle that reflects upon your internal turmoil or success is Twitter. Like that's so fucking funny to me. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, in the end, we are all just people in the darkness trying to shine our little light. That's all.
And we tell
doing.
These stories over and over that are like, but the meek will inherit the earth. And it's like, I really don't know if that's true.
Right.
But I did like, I found myself comparing him talking to the brother-in-law to like the end scene of Llewyn Davis. Like when he says, you let someone else get rich off your ideas because you don't believe in them enough. That almost pissed me off at the character as much as I'm pissed in Llewyn Davis when the guy says, I don't hear money in it. So I did have very emotional but I was in a highly receptive emotional state. So I get
it's
a
that.
weird movie.
It's one of those lessons. Yeah, for me, it's one of those lessons that is almost immediately redeemable. I guess what I mean by that is like when you it's one of those thoughts that when you have it, you go like, that's a good thought. That's a good thing to remember. That's universal. It should be, it keeps me humble. It's all those things like the lucky idea, the idea of just, I was lucky. But it's also one of those like useless thoughts. And that's something that I really wrestle with when I think about the same question.
And you're like, yeah,
He is like, yeah,
Or,
fucking great,
yeah.
fucker. You know, like you're not helpful right now, because you know, and that's because my energy, my brain is usually spent thinking about what I'm doing wrong or what I could be doing better, which is a much different like platform to be thinking about your life than I'm just rolling with the punches, which is very much what this guy's doing. Like when I was kind of dogging on him for being passionless, which I still argue he is, you know, like there.
He laughs at one moment, and it's so notable. I put in the notes. Oh shit, he laughed. Like, was that a mistake?
This kind of laid back, kind of laissez-faire aspect about life, which I just don't share generally. Not that I haven't had moments that I've done that, but that you have expressed like, oh yeah, I was kind of in that way when I was watching this. It really doesn't. Of course I'm the ears that it just falls flat upon, you know, like I'm not ready to hear it. I do think there is charm in this movie, and I did want to say, like, I don't think it's entirely because it's just not my taste. I do argue that that's probably most of it, and someone can immediately dismiss me by saying like, well, you just don't like mumblecore movies, so you're not gonna, this mumblecore movie, you're not gonna like it. But it's like I like, for example, like there's a scene that I did laugh at, which is when he's buying, like in the first like 10 minutes, he's buying the hot dog stand itself from this guy they later call like the hot dog Nazi. I forget his name.
He's
in the movie.
To quote
Buddy,
Deep Space Nine, he's a soulless minion of orthodoxy.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually cares. Like, who gives a shit? He actually cares that only hot dogs be sold from the hot dog cart. Yeah,
like you're
weird.
tarnishing the stand by putting this vegan food in it. But yeah, he says, he has a line where he goes, you get some wieners and buns and condiments and you're in business. Yep. And I just, the way he said it, along with the like cavalier conversation that they're having, I got big Christopher Guest energy. Like I immediately was transported to Pistachio
Christopher Guest
Nut.
is a great example of mumblecore that works on you because it kind of shares some.
Works. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because the charm is in what you said at the top, which is that it is mundane, and the lifelessness comes from the fact that it's not the moments that we go, oh, these are spectacular moments or moments in someone's life that mattered. These are mundane moments that didn't matter, but they stack up, which is kind of what is closer to what life is for, you know, the percentage of time that we're on the earth. And I think that there's truth to that. And I see that, and I see humor in it, but I am distracted by like when you jump to at the end of the film, when you're saying like all the success story, I completely got out of that. Like I was out of like caring for what happened to Bill, and I was kind of frustrated when it just said 8 months later, and then suddenly he's a great success. I'm like, what did you build though? Like, because there's nothing before this that made me think that you had the ability to do this. There's your motivational change was you met an asshole and he asked you a question, which I think is an honestly good question, which is, do you believe in the happy poet? And he goes, yeah. And he's like, I don't believe you. And he's like, you know what? Well, fuck you. I'm the happy poet. And then he goes and does something. So I'm like, actually, I know they make that venture capitalist guy out to be an asshole, and he is, because he's wearing a polo shirt and stuff. But he's instrumental, and he's not asking horrible questions. He's asking legitimate questions. He may look like, and he's framed as a douche, but he's dropping some wisdom, and it seemed to knock Bill out of his funk. I'm not saying that he's a good guy. I'm just saying that, like, what is the special sauce then to Bill that made him go, now I need to do something and get to work?
I'm not sure, but I think
more so than what we saw before.
That's what I mean, is that in the end, I think that's ultimately the weakness, is that there was an opportunity here to potentially say something sophisticated and nuanced or fresh about fairness or unfairness or success or failure or passion, and I can't think of what that thing is, because if I could, I would write a movie that ends with that insight, right? But right now in conversation. But my point is, uh, for all of its mumblecoreness and meandering and quote unquote structurelessness, I think the weak part of the movie to me is that it boils down by the end to a plot where a guy turns a small business into a big business, gets the girl, and a B plot where he makes an unlikely friend and then they have a falling out and then they make up. These are highly, highly recognizable traditional arcs, to the point that it feels like I don't know. I just feel like it's a safety net, or there's something about that bears deeper examination that isn't there, and it's more of an but again, I go in this little tight circle because maybe that's the point, because the whole point of mumblecore is to be unassuming and not try to reinvent the thing. And then that's his point, is he's saying, I have a lot of passion, but that passion isn't behind something necessarily, right? Like, it's important that he's a poet. I don't have to apply my passion first of all to my facial muscles. I don't owe it to you to prove I'm passionate. I think that is the point of the film. I prove I'm passionate through my actions. I got the ingredients. I made the cart. I'm standing here, right? I showed up. And that should be all it takes. And it shouldn't have to be about any particular art. As Curtis says, the way you live your life can be a work of art. And he goes, yeah, that's right. And my passion is just that I will choose to take the sequence of steps that do the thing. I just think, for my money, I like insights beyond, and then it worked out for him. But I do like that he comments, it's just because I got lucky. So it's like, there's nuance, but there could have been more. It's a good movie. It's not a great movie. This is where I'm landing with it. And I do think where it's weak is when it clings to, well, that's how a movie would go, like a real movie, so let's just go that way. Especially when it gets to the point where, I thought there was a good joke that really embodies this, but I actually find it a weakness of Bill. To me, the least likable thing about Bill is something that I totally get going over your head in 2010, but in 2022 feels a lot more urgent, which is Bill is a cis hetero white guy who ends up landing a girl who's, he's punching above his weight from terms of traditional attractiveness or what have you. And that's not my problem with Bill. My problem with Bill is that a guy comes up and says, you're never going to succeed selling, quote, faggy food like that. And he just lets it slide. And his other friend says, dudes were made to pound puss. That's what women are for. And he lets it slide. And indeed, that character becomes his best friend and business partner. And I think in 2022, there's more of an onus that we're aware of, that like, that's weird. He should have said something. Like, it's on you to actually, you should report that shit, or you know what I mean? Like, it's, and they
separate yourself from that toxicity.
They do make a joke about it that I actually laughed hard at, which is when he says, you should have told that Nazi to go fuck himself. And he goes, yeah, well, that's essentially what I did, was tell him to go fuck himself. But then like, no, you didn't. You didn't say shit. You
didn't say shit. There. He immediately also after says, and the reason I didn't like tell him that. So it's like he's like, the reason I didn't literally say that. Yeah. Yeah. It's like staring him right in the face. That's yeah. You're absolutely
It was funny to me, but I also thought like Donnie never gets called out for being such a bastard, and I thought that was kind of odd, just from the 2022 lens. And it's also interesting that in between then and now, Bob's Burgers did an episode about, they start a delivery service, but then someone starts piggybacking to sell weed on the route, and it breaks out in the exact same way. Yeah, that's neither here nor there. More than Bob's Burgers, more than anything, this felt like a flavor of Mike Judge to me. It felt like Extract. It felt like Silicon Valley at moments.
It's kind of antithetical to
King of the Hill.
It's antithetical to Mike Judge to me in statement, even though I'd say that in style and form there's a lot of similarities. I think Mike Judge is more occupied with kind of the sadness of opportunities lost, as opposed to this, which is definitely about like being happy with the small victories. I think that they're a different worldview when it comes down to it. That's just me though. Mike Judge is so occupied. Like, look at Idiocracy is like to me is the most Mike Judge thing ever made, and its whole premise is like, oh, the dumb inherited the earth and it's all fucked, you know.
That's interesting. So to me, I think it depends where you grab the handle, right? Where you grab Mike Judge by. To me,
Sure.
King of the Hill is the most Mike Judge thing ever, and I just think it's very compelling that there's one of its signature jokes is four guys standing still going, "Yep, mm-hmm."
Yeah,
Yep.
it's
like it's the most
that's true.
mumblecore thing that's ever made it to primetime adult animation for sure.
That's true. I do think, yeah, that King of the Hill definitely has, like, I guess a TV show will always be able to show so many more colors than a statement like a film.
True.
Like a feature film with a thesis. His thesis is usually look at these animals being stupid. It's kind of beautiful and kind of a tragedy. But this guy doesn't really want to focus on the tragedy as much, or like Paul Gordon, he does like choose a basic tragic element, which is that I guess technically the guy wants to do something straight from the rip. You know, it's like we don't even have an inciting incident. We fire on all cylinders from the first scene. Want to start this.
Funny to say, but Bill never refused the call. He was ready to be a hero from step one.
From step one, which is, you know, but like it's because the choice is not that big. It's just almost like a declaration of self, which is what the movie's about. So it actually works. Now you can be bored by that because you can compare it to like in Indiana Jones or something.
In Top Gun, his declaration of self was blowing shit up. I like that.
But its commentary is not reserved for the reflection of how other people choose to see you. It's a reflection of how you choose to see yourself, right? That is what the movie's about. And so I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say about the distinction between like Mike Judge and Paul Gordon.
But you mentioned the Duplass brothers. I highly recommend, if you do like stuff like this or this conversation is tickling your fancy, Paddleton. Have you seen Paddleton?
I haven't seen most. I've seen like maybe 6 mumblecore movies.
It's Duplass, one of the Duplasses. You know, I can't tell them apart. It's the guy from Creep with Ray Romano. Right. I think Mark. And it's
Mark
just
is the league and the more successful quote unquote one.
Yeah. They're neighbors and they are friends, but not super close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them gets cancer and dies over time. And they become closer over the course of that. And the guy helps him and, you know, holds him when he dies ultimately. And it is devastating, dude. And it's really makes you sonder hard. It makes you feel like look at a little tacky apartment building and be like, I wonder what huge emotions are swirling inside that little box. So I don't know. It's less mumblecore than this, and I highly recommend Paddleton for the feels it gave me. But I do think that's the strength of stuff that, I guess I'll say this. Mumblecore is an interesting pool from which I think we can draw learnings and tropes and little asides that make for interesting flourishes in quote unquote real movies. I don't like a movie that goes full mumblecore usually. So yeah, this is ultimately not my favorite movie, but I still think it makes for a very interesting discussion. And when I said I only laughed at the end, that was untrue. There were a couple moments I laughed. Like, did you laugh? Because I like that it's his identity. It's the only thing we know about him is that he's a vegan vegetarian. And the moment when he goes, oh, I actually wouldn't call myself I still eat meat.
Yeah,
sometimes.
that was
so.
like a
I
little
was like,
fucking
that
A.
is funny.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's funny.
I also liked there's this kind of, it feels like it was written by someone who isn't a vegetarian, or there's just like really broad vegetarian talk. Like he's like, oh, she's like, first time he meets Agnes, like it's the there's this interaction and like this kind of like melding of them two. There's a like slight flirtation about like what like he's doing and what he's all about, and he's describing the sandwich, and he describes his sandwich that he's like, yeah, it's pretty good, it's got a lot of good veggies on it.
Yeah.
It's just like, I guess that's technically true about vegetarians. They would like something that has a quote lot of good veggies on it.
Good veggies.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar to you got those hot dogs with the nitrous in it? You mean nitrates? Yeah, give me 2 of them motherfuckers.
Yeah, I think that the improv does sing.
Of course you get good moments.
People.
Yeah.
And it also creates some of the moments that are like, man, that did not land, and you just like you should have edited that out, but for some reason you loved it. Which yeah, I guess that kind of. So we talked about earlier about like how we reflected on the making of a movie in 2010. I think this is pertinent in this point in this conversation to talk about ego a little bit. I here's what I'll say. Writing, directing, and starring in a film is very tough. I've never actually done all 3 of those roles, but I've done some of them. I know that you've kind of done, parts of those roles as well. So we've always had the benefit of each other. But you know as well as I do that when you're in that role, especially in the creative seat, the catbird seat, you doubt yourself constantly. You ask yourself, is this movie like going to do anything? And it doesn't get that much better throughout the process. You're not sure what it will become. Your back is against the wall. That shot is not quite what you wanted. Every day kind of racks your nerves in a way that you get this. There's a real existential threat real fast. And that's what you were talking about with your current state. And it takes an alarming amount of ego or faith in your project to bring it across the finish line. So I do want to commend Paul Gordon just because like this is not an easy thing to do. We could dunk on the production design, the lighting all day. I mean, it will never stop bothering me that
his climactic emotional close-up monologue of him, and he's the star and director. Right. The lighting is so bad. You can't see his face. It's like, why did you do that?
Well, it's like you didn't even watch. You've never watched a movie. You're like,
or don't you have enough ego that you want your money shot to look good? You don't even want your own close-up to look good. Okay.
Like, when you, I love there's a whole beat that it almost feels like, this is inside baseball, but like it feels like a Channel 101 days, like where things are like when there's a beat of the story where it's like he bought a stand that has a hot dog on it, like on display. So he tries to kind of cover it up because the first day he goes out there, they're all like, they think he's selling hot dogs and he's like not. So he starts covering it up and he adds like a, black chalkboard and he adds, he covers it with like some duct tape essentially. And it's just like, okay, so that was out of necessity. But then later in the film, they mention like, oh, I see you took away all those buzzes and whistles when he decides that he's going to sell hot dogs because he just needs to make a profit.
His dark night of the soul.
Night of the soul. And there's a commentary about like I thought like it had personality, like your personalizations were some of the best part of the cart. And I was like, really? That was someone's takeaway when they look at that shitty cart? And it was just like, man, it is a separation to me that it's just like, didn't you care about that aspect of the movie? But to play my own devil's advocate, I remember when we were making Kill Me Now, when I was, doing the DP thing, and trying and just worrying about all these small little details and problems that I felt like I was the only one who could really do it. And just this Sisyphusian kind of ordeal that it was waking up every day that I'm just like, I can't worry about that. There's just some problems that stack up and you just are like, I'm sorry. I wish I had a perfect amount of time with the perfect amount of resources to solve that problem. But I just can't care because there's just too many other demands of my time. And that is, to me, like that's the nutshell of this movie when we talk about ego in this way. And I think the ego of a lot of mumblecore films, which is like, if they don't feel that like the social contract of life that says like you put this energy in these things and you get magic machine of life spits out thing that says this is what you get back. Most mumblecore movies, essential to almost all their theme, they're like, that whole system is stupid and fucked and I don't believe in it. And I respect that message. I really do. And it's kind of part and parcel with your, the theme of this movie, which is, kind of I got lucky, or not theme, but rather resolution of this movie. And I think that kind of transactional view of reality is a delusion. But it's also the one that we put our stock into every time we go out and make a movie. So I do think it's about ego, but it's about the hypocrisy of it. And every time I get in that funk, or I get like kind of like what you were saying, where sometimes, you're just like, what the fuck is this all about? It's usually because I feel like I've been wronged by life, right? That life has not exchanged to me the things that I wish that it did.
As soon as you think that, your brain reflects back. If you're like me, your mind also reflects back to you the whole spectrum of human suffering, and like, who are you to fucking? There's medieval peasants who were tortured on the rack and shit.
Look at the ego on this asshole is what I say to myself in a dark room. Yeah, exactly. And I think that this scratches at the surface of it. This meaning, this movie, but it's the theme, the concept, the digging that this movie's starting to do is very interesting and very at the heart of mumblecore. And respect is due, but I do think that is, like you pointed out, I thought we're going to probably in this podcast get a little bit more traction on the whole idea of like, we're putting our faith in our movie in order to like cross the finish line, and that's not exactly how it goes every time. The idea. Well, that's why it makes me so angry, right? If you've spent years of your life trying to do something that you believe is your calling or something, and some rich asshole tells you you didn't succeed because you don't believe in yourself enough, you go, dude, that's not why. Okay, don't do that. Don't. I get that. I totally get that from Bill. Yeah. So like. Yeah, so
I don't have to validate how much I care about my own goals in life to you, like I get that position. It just feels kind of like a betrayal of mumblecore when it just goes 8 months later and everything's great.
Well, I think that is kind of what mumblecore is, but it's a betrayal to stories to me, because it's like the punchline is, and then he did the thing, and then he's fine. It all worked out. It is like, good. I'm glad I was on for him, story. I guess. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
I really laughed at. Also, I like what you did there with the cursive. Yeah. Oh yeah, that font's kick ass.
Yeah.
It's the other, right? It's like, if you're numb, if you're numb, then tiny little stuff is more noticeable. So it's just the idea of like, little jokes get bigger laughs because they're bathed in a sea of calm. Like, we're just being very calm the whole time. So a little joke can make you laugh in a way that you wouldn't if it was crowded out by a bunch of punchlines.
Right. There's when they were teaching like I'm sure you had the same like story class, but they will often draw, and I know Vonnegut has, like, on YouTube you can watch his lectures about this kind of thing. They usually, a teacher will bring out this whiteboard and then draw like a bell curve, like a cosine, and be like, that's story right there, because this is the action, this is the lift, this is like the downfall of the character, and you kind of map it to some kind of, like, the axes are strangely like the momentum of your story, but also like tragedy and despair versus happiness and elation. There's a lot of things going into it. It's this nebulous kind of concept, and there's a teacher when he was doing it was saying like that he has this joke where he's like, and here's like a Michael Bay film, and it's just a line at the very top, just saying like everything is exciting all the time, and usually I think he would use that to turn that discussion into a quote that Spielberg had, which is that when someone was like, I just like your movies because they're like boring or not boring at all is something. And Spielberg's response was like, no, you need boring parts of a movie. If you don't have boring parts of a movie, they won't know what's exciting.
You don't have exciting parts. Yeah.
And I don't think he means that literally. I think he's just saying the relative kind of dynamics are important, because if you don't have dynamics, people don't know what to focus on or how to focus on the things that they're focusing on.
And mumblecore is an experiment in saying, well, what if we didn't anyway? Let's ignore that rule. Yeah.
The viewer had to figure that shit out. Like, what's the resonant line? What's the nonsense line? What's a joke? What's not a joke? And it's like we give you fewer clues than usual to that shit. Yeah. I have respect for that, but it's one of the same reasons I like film more than I like theater. I'm very much a fan of deliberate intention and being taken on for a ride. I like sitting in my chair and going through a tunnel and going
yeah.
And they go, look at this thing. And I go, yeah. And then they're like, look at that thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. Why? Because it makes it a little bit more palatable, the idea of being a human.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's just, I think, why we like movies. That's not necessarily a testament to this particular movie. But, that is what it is, I guess.
Do what you got to do to get by. You got to take life by the sack, because it'll take you by the sack and it'll squeeze, dude. And you got to be the one doing the squeezing. And then Bill says, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do now. Be the one doing the squeezing. I think that's most jokes in this movie, right? Is where it's like, that's funny because he wouldn't say something like that.
Right. Or that's information that the world will throw people at you all the time that say that's how you live life, because that's my experience.
Right,
and
exactly.
There are some people that just does not work on. Like, that is just, nah, I don't buy that.
Yeah. I also really liked, and then I'll be done cherry picking jokes to try and get you to like the movie more. But I think the last big laugh for me was after he reads Chasm, which is his horribly dark, depressing poem that has imagery that invokes like crawling into a vagina and dying and shit. And he looks at her reaction and he says, oh, so, okay, so I guess the humor didn't jump out at you. And you're like, oh, to him, that was a funny poem. Right. Okay. That was a really good moment to me.
Right. There's a little bit like Mitch Hedberg in that, but like, I don't know.
I guess my point is, in the middle of the movie, I thought Paul Gordon in real life might be really pretentious and boring to hang out with. And then by the end of the movie, I thought, oh, no,
he's just funny. A guy.
He's a guy. Yeah. He would be a fun guy to hang out with.
Yeah. I agree with that. I have no distaste for the man.
Paul Gordon
or
personally.
Sure. Nor his movies. No, I think I like it adequately.
Yeah. So the resolution is that you finally find a rich dude who swoops in and lets you achieve your dream, and that will happen for all of us.
That's going to happen for everyone. And there are also movies that are about when it doesn't happen for you.
Yeah.
And we call those tragedies.
Yeah. But that's what's amazing, is that they it's so compelling to me that it seems to be the two stories we tell, right? Or in some ways you can bucket every story to a validation that the universe is fair and there is cause and effect and comeuppance for bad people and reward for good people with good hearts, and movies that are about how that's not true. There isn't that. And those are the only two stories we have.
What's the and that's and that's why the bell curve is like a cosine or a sine wave. It's up, down, up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
But what's the line? I feel like I'm a dummy because I didn't study literature long enough, but I feel like I don't know. the only difference between a tragedy and a comedy is one ends with a wedding and one ends with a funeral.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
but it's still the same sequence of events. Or there's the Joan Didion, I believe, story about how it has a bunch of different stories of the way this couple's life could turn out, but everyone ends with, and then they died eventually. And it's like, yeah, that's the end. That's always the end.
I am,
like,
but I am so much more invested in the machinations of why that's true. Like I remember my eyes opened up in like high school, and my English professor told me about just navigating this space and saying like, okay, imagine there's a woman in a, like, she's clearly wearing like one of her best dresses, and she's standing by a curb, and all you get is you just get like a basic shot, or he didn't design it. He didn't talk about it like shots. I just, that's all I can think of. But a car drives by and splashes a puddle and ruins her dress. And he's like, context matters, right? If I were to have told you up leading to that point that this woman is a piece of shit and just has like shit upon all of the people in her family, abandoned all the people that love her, you would find that maybe a comedic moment, or at least you might have some catharsis that was a little different than if she was the reverse of that. And if everything leading up to that moment was completely done fueling the idea that she is a good person. To me, that those mechanics, that context building, and that those dynamics, like Spielberg would say, are to me how you make good stories and talk to people from across the divide. You say, now look at these basic truths, and then let me build with these little Lincoln logs a tiny little house for you to kind of sit in. This doesn't want to play with the Lincoln logs. It wants the philosophical conversation, which it has definitely gotten out of us. But I don't know if I would have had this conversation if I wasn't supposed to be on a microphone at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would necessarily have these revelations from mumblecore unless I was requested to try to find some meaning out of it. I think that because I think what gets in the way is the lack of interest in the medium that he's working in, the lack of care for trying to create a film that is engaging to the audience in every moment in one way or another is a distraction. I can only think about it the whole time, about how it's not trying to please me. I know that that's a very arrogant thing, but it's arrogant to be an audience member, like I paid for a movie, give me a show. And that to me is like, I don't know. That's the only thing keeping me from liking this movie, because like I said, Christopher Guest, one of the funniest comedians in the world. What is he doing that this guy isn't doing? His jokes are just as good.
It says something very similar to a sentiment that Vonnegut summed up very well, I think, which is that humans inherently, for better or worse, want to be loved unconditionally, meaning they want to believe that their life and existence has value just because they didn't ask to be born and they were anyway, and they're here now. They don't want to earn it. They don't want it to be contingent on what they can do for you or service-based. Everyone is seeking some proof that other people will love them just because they're here. And I think that's very apt and true. And I think that's very mumblecore.
Yeah.
Just show up.
Show up. I don't know.
As we did.
Agape, is that it? Agape?
Carpe diem?
Yeah, something like that. But
Grab the nuts.
Yeah, I think that's like Christian concept. That,
Carpe die's nuts. That must have been said thousands of times by now.
Well, you want to do jokes, but I'll tell you that, Michael, I love you.
I love you. Let's make a stand.
Let's make a stand, or you know what? Fuck it. Let's go play some video games.
Hell yeah.
All right.
Fuck it, dude. Let's go Tiny Tina's. All right.
Let's go
thank
Tiny
you
Tina's.
again to Aaron, Defender of the Galaxy. Whew, Galaxy's safe. That's good to know. That takes a load off my mind.
And thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you for your service and for your support. If you'd like to support our further endeavors, head on over to patreon.com/smallbeans. You'll get access to a bunch of exclusive podcasts and you'll also help us keep the old lights on. If you want to support us at the Pick the Flick tier, you can make us watch a movie, and then we'll talk about how we didn't love it, we didn't hate it.
yeah. Sorry,
that'll be fun.
Aaron, if this is like, man, I was hoping they would think this is awesome, and one half of us at least was shitting on it the whole time.
I just hope it was an illuminating conversation. It was for me.
It was for me.
So hopefully that translated.
So thank you for that.
Till next time.
We love you.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.